Well, everyone, welcome back. Welcome to the second session of this conference on fishers' welfare. We are very pleased to have a number of other distinguished speakers in this next panel. We have a few announcements that we want to make in this session. We have lots of speakers today, so for the speakers, please do limit your remarks to the minutes that were announced to you. If you see me standing next to you, wanting to give you a handshake or so, that means it's probably time to conclude. But it is also to say thank you for your remarks. So I'll come and stand up if it is really at the time that is the limit. We will have time after each session for one or two questions. So if there is a question, we will have some time for that after each presentation. If we are lacking a bit of time, then we might have to cut that down a little bit. But certainly we hope that there will be time for questions. If not questions during the talks, then certainly during the coffee breaks, you should be able to speak to anyone who is speaking. It is wonderful that we can be here. We said thanks to so many different people already, to all of the distinguished guests that were with us in the first panel. But I'd like again to say, you can see all the logos here, just how thankful we are to all of those organizations for supporting us financially, but also in many other logistical ways to make sure everyone's here present today. Thank you to all of our sponsors. I'd like to say thank you, and you can join me in a round of applause to all of those who are working behind the scenes. So many people at the registration booth, or helping with the sound, or helping with the food, or helping in other ways. Let's please say thank you to all of those who are here. This week we're talking about the challenges that fishers face. In 2003, the music television MTV Europe created what's called the Exit Campaign, End Exploitation and Trafficking. And one of the artists that they got to make a video, his name is Arzani, and he's from Myanmar, and he did a video called The Traps of Life. And he did this in collaboration with an animation concept by Min Mosai, with lyrics by Min Myung-ang, both accomplished artists in Myanmar. We're going to watch this video in its original language. It's not necessarily hard to understand the story of the video, but as I understand, we have Mary Kin and Daisy Berry. Are they in the room today? Yes, they're from Myanmar. So if you want to know exactly what it says, then you have to visit them at lunch and they can do a translation for you. Roughly what the video will talk about is a fisher who's a victim of modern slavery. He escapes his harsh environment in which one of his colleagues has been beaten. He wants to go back to his family. Returns to his village only to be rejected and still pursued relentlessly by the company seeking to recapture him. With help, and as we find out, it's the help of the singer who in a certain way is an embodiment of you, all of us who are the eyes and hands of those who can help. The police arrest this bad ship owner, and the fisher can finally return to the love of his family and community. Who will help rebuild trust in the world so that we can help all of those in need? The singer is inviting us. Let's listen to this video to get us in the mood for hearing about all of these very difficult situations.
Wow.
I want to learn the language after that and learn more of what the song says. Well, we are very privileged to have so many distinguished speakers with us today. And our first keynote speech will be from His Eminence Cardinal Stephen Brislin, Metropolitan Archbishop of Cape Town in Kaapstad, South Africa. He has served in various capacities in the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference. Currently, he serves as the liaison bishop of the Catholic Parliamentary Office, the Dennis Hurley Peace Institute, as well as the Rural Development Support Program. He holds the portfolio of the President of the Catholic Board of Education, member of the Department for Christian Formation, Liturgy and Culture, chairperson of the SACBC, communication officer and spokesperson of the Bishops' Conference. In relation to our conference, Cardinal Brislin serves on the International Santa Marta Group, a joint venture between church and law enforcement for counter-trafficking of human persons. Cardinal, please come and address us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. I have been asked to talk about, or taking as a basis a verse from the book of Exodus. I have witnessed the affliction of my people and heard their cry of complaint against their slave drivers. So thank you very much indeed for the invitation to be with you for this most important conference, held at a time when there is so much uncertainty and insecurity in the world. Over many years there has been real and life-changing progress in developing a deeper understanding of human dignity and human rights. And this understanding has been concretized in legislation that protects the rights of all people without fear or favor, at least theoretically. The legislation is concrete, but often the implementation of laws leaves much to be desired, and laws are often applied inequitably. However, over recent years, there is evidence of a change even in the philosophy of human rights. I believe that Pope Francis is correct when he says, our own days, however, seem to be showing signs of a certain regression. Ancient conflicts thought long buried are breaking out anew, while instances of a myopic, extremist, resentful, and aggressive nationalism are on the rise. In some countries, the concept of popular and national unity, influenced by various ideologies, is creating new forms of selfishness and a loss of the social sense under the guise of defending national interests. He then poses the question, nowadays, what do certain words like democracy, freedom, justice, or unity really mean? They have been bent and shaped to serve as tools for domination, as meaningless tags that can be used to justify any action. I think it is well to take note of what the Holy Father is saying, since it is clear that so often what is said in lofty language about protecting people often disguises the reality of the disregard and violation of human dignity and human rights. Beyond the facade of lofty speech and the expression of great ideals, there lies a reality of people in pain, abandoned, and often without hope. It is to them that we must turn our attention and to allow our hearts to feel their suffering. In our own quest to be human and have human hearts, we must allow their voice to touch us, recalling the words of Scripture. Whoever shuts their ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered. Human trafficking is a tragedy. It is a tragedy for those who are trafficked, depriving them of their freedom, their livelihood, their loved ones, and their justifiable desire for the pursuit of happiness. It is an expression of power, domination, and control of some human beings over others, stripping victims of their human dignity and their right to choose and live their lives as they want. It is based on greed and selfishness. But human trafficking is also a tragedy for those who traffic, because they've abandoned their humanity. They've become enslaved by their own obsessive greed and lust for power and control and money. It is a tragedy for the loved ones of those who are trafficked, who go through the agony and pain of not knowing what has become of their son, their daughter, their sister, or their brother. It is also a tragedy for society that is weakened, wounded, and scarred by the cruelty and inhumanity of trading in persons. The modern-day slave trade, trafficking in human persons, is mostly a hidden reality, and so it's often difficult to gauge the extent of the problem. Yet it is also true that it is hidden right in front of our eyes, but remains invisible to us, as victims are prevented from or are too terrified to break the silence and to call for help. It is truly a moral imperative for all people, and Pope Francis has made it clear that we all have a role to play. But it is an imperative to counteract this cruel and inhumane practice. However, I believe that it must be done in the context of a commitment to increase our efforts overall for the protection of human dignity and freedom, particularly as there does seem to be a type of regression, as Pope Francis has said. We cannot try and protect human dignity in one context while other contexts are being neglected. Therefore, I believe there is a need for a renewed dedication for upholding and promoting human rights and for exposing the ugly realities that are disguised and lie buried through the distortion of politically correct speech, which serves to bend and shape domination and to justify unjust actions. Human trafficking, as we know, takes different forms. Potential victims are fishers who work on fishing boats on contract for a specific time. They are often forced to work beyond their contract periods for an extended period of time. They come from many different languages and cultures, and this frequently exacerbates their difficulties due to language barriers. In South Africa, there are 7 ports for foreign flag vessels, namely Durban, Richards Bay, Port Elizabeth or Tavega, Kruger, Saldanha Bay, East London, and Cape Town. The 2 largest ports, Durban and Cape Town, receive at least 4,600 foreign flag merchant and fishing vessels. Cape Town, where I am based, is of particular strategic importance, being at the southern tip of Africa and an important port for ships circumnavigating Africa. In the event of any difficulty in the Suez Canal or Mediterranean Sea, as is the case at present, more and more vessels come past Cape Town. Fishing vessels come in and out in order to resource the nearby rich fishing grounds of the Atlantic, Indian, and Southern Oceans on boats with mostly Taiwanese, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese flags. And the fishers are from a variety of countries: Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka. They work in dirty, difficult, and dangerous conditions. In both Durban and Cape Town, there are well-established Catholic centres designed to give relief and assistance to seafarers. Through Stella Maris, seafarers are given a safe place for relaxation and social interaction, as well as spiritual support, medical help, and if necessary, advocacy. The difficulties expressed by fishers in common with many other places in the world are, firstly, unsafe working and living conditions with insufficient food, dirty drinking water. Secondly, labor issues, delayed or withholding wages by agencies for up to 6 months, excessive overtime, sometimes working 18 hours a day, incorrect records kept in logbooks regarding hours worked. Thirdly, little or no medical treatment for on-board treatment of common illnesses, despite salary deductions being made for those occurrences. Fourthly, the practice of extending contracts, for example, extending a 2-year contract for another 2 years. often resulting in fishers working with expired passports. Fifthly, physical and verbal abuse. Sixthly, debt bondage. And seventhly, withholding of documents, passports, seamen's books, training certificates, and medical certificates may be kept by the captain, or contracts kept by the manning agencies without copies being given to the seafarers. Since the captain is the sole authority at sea, he has enormous power, with little or no monitoring or accountability. Because they spent many months at sea, the seafarers become isolated, invisible and vulnerable to the abuse of power by the captain and others. Aggrieved seafarers are reluctant to make the decision to end their contract, even if they would like to do so, since this results in breach of contract and they would undoubtedly have to pay their own repatriation costs. They may not be paid for the time that they have worked, and they may have to meet incurred debts to the manning agency for which they are then held liable. The possibility, and indeed the reality of exploitation of seafarers on the high seas leaves them defenseless in the face of potential forced labor and exploitation. Conventions and legislation are in place offering seafarers protection of their rights. But as with other situations in contexts of human rights, as noted at the beginning of this talk, the difficulty that exists is not so much a lack of legislation, but rather the implementation of the law and the lack of necessary and effective mechanisms to monitor the implementation. Port authorities may apply the law in terms of inspection of seaworthiness of the vessel, inspection of equipment or the contents or cargo. However, they are often reluctant to get involved in issues relating to working conditions or disputes between the captain or vessel owner and seafarers. Seafarers have little recourse even when they are in port to access assistance to ensure that their rights are upheld and that injustices are dealt with. They remain vulnerable to ill treatment by the captain or the owner, are at risk of losing their remuneration for work done. They are held liable for debts and face even the risk of abandonment in a foreign place. The fact that the captain and or the manning company hold many of the documents of seafarers, including passports, results in the seafarers potentially facing legal issues with the authorities and also the inability to access things like banking and administrative procedures. Furthermore, if documentation is not returned, future employment is placed in jeopardy. To address the particular difficulties of fishers and seafarers, as well as to address the wider issue of human trafficking, a global response is needed. Pope Francis has said that on more than one occasion, trafficking in persons and other contemporary forms of enslavement are a worldwide problem that needs to be taken seriously by humanity as a whole, since criminal organizations employ global networks to achieve their goals. Efforts to eliminate this phenomenon also demand a common and indeed a global effort on the part of various sectors of society. And this is the rationale, for example, of the Santa Marta movement, to bring together law enforcement agencies, the church, and other stakeholders from countries around the world, precisely because people are trafficked across borders and continents. The extension of Santa Marta routes to more countries is part of the effort to counter trafficking by ensuring that local conditions and situations are catered for. Efforts of counteracting human trafficking can only realistically be achieved at a local level, of course working always in collaboration with the global movement. Similarly, the well-being and protection of seafarers from exploitation is being and must be addressed both globally and locally. I would like to just offer an example which is not connected to human trafficking as such, but how I believe people can be protected. The Mining and Faith Reflection Initiative is a global gathering that had its origins in a response to Pope Francis, who had expressed his concerns regarding the exploitative nature of mining operations in different parts of the world. The aim of the MFRI, Mining and Faith Reflection Initiative, is to encourage mining companies to commit to ethical mining through participation by those most directly affected by mining operations. The intention is to become more aware of and to take into account the needs and concerns of local populations where mining is or will be taking place. To consider also environmental concerns and the rights of workers. In short, it is an attempt to focus on the needs of those affected by mining and to move away from considering only profits or the expectations of shareholders. In many ways, it is the implementation of the principle that the economy is meant to serve people and not that people are there to serve the economy. The local South African equivalent of the MFRI is called Courageous Conversations, and it brings together the CEOs of mining companies, faith leaders, trade union representatives, and government officials, as well as some experts in the field of mining. And it is meant to be a safe place for honest and open dialogue to take place about the mining industry and its practices. Neither of these organizations, the MFRI or the Courageous Conversations, is perfect. They do not solve all the problems, but they can address issues and concerns, and they can find ways to surmount difficulties which otherwise would have developed and festered into conflicts. There have been some very good success stories from different parts of the world which demonstrate the strength of participation, dialogue, and collaboration. Such dialogue in the fishing industry, organized globally and locally, is surely feasible and is surely happening in some places. It would be beneficial to hear about them so that they can be replicated. Such groups can lead to more ethical practices and a greater commitment to monitor the industry for the sake of good practice, providing a safe place for dialogue between owners, management, representatives of fishers and seafarers, from mining companies, faith leaders, and government officials, especially port authorities, would be a way to take preventative measures against the exploitation of fishers and seafarers. Human trafficking is part of a much greater and tragic reality of the abuse and misuse of persons, which is being brought into relief by many modern-day problems and conflicts. It is correct for a group such as Santa Marta to focus on the specific and cruel practice, but as I said in the introduction, it should also be seen in a wider context of discovering and rediscovering our humanity, and as Pope Francis says, committing ourselves to a new humanism. In his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, the Holy Father uses the parable of the Good Samaritan to illustrate our responsibility to hear the cry of those in need with compassion and urgency, and to respond with concrete actions of bringing relief. Given the global nature of human trafficking, and that it is part of a much bigger problem of the erosion of human dignity and the degradation of the human person, it is evident that a necessary way of dealing with it and the restoration of human dignity is through dialogue, cooperation and action across boundaries of nations, faiths, and social spheres. Ultimately, what lies before us is the necessity for humanity to rediscover its humanity, its kindness. No longer can politicians, economists, faith leaders, scientists, or anybody else work in their fields as if they are absolute unto themselves. The walls of silos need breaking down, and to resolve the dehumanization of human beings demands that we work in unison and collaboration with a new humanism that places the human person at the center of social, political, and economic activities, knowing that these have been created in service of the human person and not the person at their service. In the words of Pope Francis, we must put human dignity back at the center, and on that pillar, build the alternative social structures we need. It is summed up by St. John in his first letter. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love one another. Whoever does not love abides in death. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll just... Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. There was lots of thanks there, one on the microphone and others off. We have a moment just for questions, and I'm wondering if there is anyone in the audience who has one question for our keynote speaker. Then perhaps let me ask the question. I would like to. I have a question primed, and it has to do with the title of your speech.
Yes.
I have witnessed the affliction of my people, and have heard their cry of complaint. Now, today I don't want to do a whole lot of theology and go very deeply into the text, but as in our faith tradition, the fact that our God listens to us, why is that important, and what practical advantage does that have for Christian mission and those who are whose faith drives them into listening to the cry of oppression?
Thank you very much indeed. I think that the particular quotation that is from the book of Exodus, and as we know from the other parts of the scriptures, is to remind us too that God is always active in the world, and that we believe that after the ascension of Jesus, he only left us physically, but he's still present among us. We also understand perfectly that through the cross and the suffering of Jesus Christ, we have been saved. And if we really want to find Christ in the world, yes, of course, we've got to be people of prayer, we receive the sacraments in the Catholic Church, we are united with God in that way. But if we want to recognize Christ in the world, we want to recognize him in the eyes of those who are suffering, and those who are still bearing the cross of Christ, because we are termed by St. Paul as the body of Christ. And so where people suffer, there is Christ suffering as well. And that should be the motivation for Christians, to be able to recognize in the eyes of those who are suffering the person of Jesus Christ himself. And that should make us respond to their suffering and to reach out to them.
Thank you very much. I believe maybe there's one more question. Yes, if you could stand up and say your name and where you're from, and ask the question, please.
Hello, His Eminence. My name is Father Peter Wen-Hong. I'm a Vietnamese missionary here in London, working here for 36 years. I have a question for you. Since your presentation based on your experience and your perspective from South Africa, so here in Taiwan, all human trafficking here in this country is defined by the definition of anti-human trafficking definition. A part of the definition is that the victim have to be proved that he or she is controlled, meaning that he or she has no freedom. So that is a very important question, important matter to be identified as human trafficking. So in the context of globally, so we do think that the definition of human trafficking needs to be changed. Otherwise, it would be very, it will be interpreted that will not be able to help seafarers in Taiwan at present or in the future, because there is a lack of evidence of freedom movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a question I think I can't really answer, in the sense that, firstly, I don't know what the Taiwanese law says exactly. Also because it does tend to be a bit of a legal question about definitions. But I think that, looking back at South Africa, for example, South Africa is the point of destination, transit, destination, transport, and third one?
I'm not sure, I'm just...
Origin.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So that in South Africa there have been a number of different very good successes of protecting and of saving people who have been subject to human trafficking. And as far as I know, There's no law in South Africa saying that they have got to prove that it was against their will. I think it will just come out in the process of the court. But I think it is a question you could actually put to Kevin if Kevin is going to have a chance to speak later on, because he would have the knowledge of it, from that legal perspective. My own point of view is that I feel that every effort must be made to give protection to people who are human trafficked and not to put unnecessary burdens on them, because normally they are terrified to come forward in the first place. And if you're going to put great burdens on them of saying you've got to prove that you're human trafficked, I think that would make it even more difficult to protect them. That's just from my own secular understanding.
Everyone, let's thank our keynote speaker. Thank you so much. Our second speaker is Mr. Michael O'Brien, who is going to speak to us on the global situation of fisheries industries and its labor force. And Mr. O'Brien works with the ITF's fisheries section for the last 3 years, and before that he was a researcher and publicist with the Irish Parliament. Michael, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, so my job in 20 minutes is to give an overview of how fisheries operates globally, is governed globally, and I do hope the interpreters can cope okay with my Irish accent. Yeah, I'm getting that because I've met problems before with that. Okay. I'm trying to figure out the figure here. How's that? Yes. Scale of the hang on. Yes. So, just to give people a sense of scale of fisheries globally, 38 million people engaged, that's full-time and part-time, in capture fisheries. So I'm not talking about aquaculture, for example, which is a growing area. 80% in Asia, so we're in the right place to discuss these issues. 13% Africa. And then in the rest of the more developed world, you can see the percentages are quite small indeed. 4.1 billion fishing vessels in the world, but overwhelmingly artisanal in scale. 45,000 above 24 metres in length. And from a trade union perspective, because my organisation, the International Transport Workers Federation, is a global federation of trade unions that organise in the maritime sector, that it's when you're operating at this, not even just 24 but 15 metres and above, tends to be the scale where you have direct employment relationships of various types. So you have a boss, a skipper, and people doing the work, often on a wage labour type basis. So you can see it's a small minority of the vessels overall. However, despite the fact that artisanal fishers who occupy most of the 4.1 million boats are 96% of the total number engaged in fishing, they're only responsible for 35% of the capture. So you just get a sense of the disproportionate impact of the 45,000 industrial scale vessels and what they take. And then you see 4 out of the 5 biggest distant water fishing countries in the world are located in Asia as well. So there is a concentration within the concentration in terms of where industrial scale fishing happens globally. And a quarter of a trillion, or $250 billion per year is the total estimated value of the industry. Again, there's another graph there to show that the concentration of the fishing fleet in 65% of the fleet globally is in Asia. And then Africa, a significant but distant second, and then you can see again the more developed world are small players in the great scheme of things. This graph here, so just for people, I don't know if you can see it at the back, we're going from the year 1950 to 2020, and the blue represents the growth of wild capture in millions of tons. And one can see that from, let's say, around 1990 onwards, the blue, the plateaus. So that's the amount of wild capture globally. That, in other words, where we've reached a limit in terms of what the industrial scale fisheries in particular can take from the seas. And the pink and purple are different types of aquaculture. And you can see that aquaculture really it began in, let's say, the 50s, 60s, but you can see it's the growth in terms of production, shall we say, or what ends up on the supermarket shelves is all coming from aquaculture, both inland and further out to sea as well. So, just to move quickly to the question of unionisation and how the ITF approaches this question. So, just to give us a couple of figures that aren't on the board about the ITF. The ITF, the International Transport Workers Federation, was formed in 1896. Our main arena of activity historically has been in the merchant marine. So cargo ships, bulk carriers, cruise ships, and so on. And we've branched into other forms of air and land-based transport. We've always had a certain brief or interest in fishing, but our fisheries section, our dedicated fisheries section, was only formed in 2018, so it's a very recent branch of the ITF, shall we say, relative to the history of the organisation. So the ITF has 740 affiliated unions organising 20 million workers in 150 countries. But fisheries is a small minority of that, but it is growing. So 144,000 fisher members among 89 of our affiliated unions in 54 countries. So we do have unions that are dedicated to organising the fisheries. We have other unions that are general seafarer unions and who will also organise the fisheries. Our part of our role is to try and encourage them to branch into fisheries as well. But the overall scale of unionisation is very, very small, 2% globally. Why is that? Well, we identify historical factors. A lot of the activity of fishing, even industrial fishing, is done away from the traditional kind of urban centres of trade union power and trade union organising. But also it's the historical prevalence of share of the catch as a form of remuneration. So share of the catch is effectively a profit share. Where your income is not secure, it's not a fixed wage, but you agree, this is how it should be done, by the way. There's agreement in advance with the skipper or the boss about how the proceeds of the catch, when you subtract the overheads like fuel and so on, how that's shared amongst the crew. So there can be a self-employed mentality which mitigates against trade union organisation. Obviously the shape of the industry, so you don't have what you see in other branches of industry where you have progressive growth and a kind of monopolisation, massive. You do have some significant companies. We gave the stat earlier on of the 5 countries where you do have very significant companies, but you still have a lot of small and medium scale industry as well. So it's very dispersed, many different employers. Whereas from a trade union point of view, often there's a convenience. You have a concentration of employers and a concentration of workers in a particular location. It lends to easier organising from a trade union perspective. And I think from the trade union perspective as well, there's been pragmatic choices for that reason. There's many people unorganised in many different branches of industry around the world, including migrant workers. And that can be where unions will put their focus rather than going for fisheries, which presents significant challenges. And then of course the question of employer resistance, that if you're an employer in the fishing industry and you've been used to for generations and not having to deal with trade unions and getting away with all sorts in terms of your treatment of crew, you will put up a fight before allowing unions to get their foot in the door. I think from the ITF perspective, what we've encountered in the last 6 years since we launched our fisheries section, that in general, there are exceptions. There are parts of the world like Norway, Iceland, Argentina, where you do have a very well organised, very well unionised fisheries workforce that's basically indigenous in character. But generally, it's a migrant worker job, particularly in the developed world, but not just in the developed world do we find that. And linked with migration, you have the issue of crewing agents. Cardinal mentioned already the illegal extraction of crewing fees and debt bondage that can arise when people locate work on the other side of the world. Restrictive permit systems, which can be a big issue. So you tend to be beholden to a particular employer. You lack that mobility, so it gives the employer an enormous advantage. and yearly contracts. So like you don't have long-term security, and if you're looking to have your contract renewed again, it makes you very tolerant of abuses and improper practices on the vessel. Multi-tier racialised pay, salary versus share of the catch. So the scenario we often encounter is that, just to give an example, that on a European vessel where they're operating in Europe or around the continent of Africa, the type of scenario I often encounter in my role in the ITF, which is concentrated in the continent of Africa, and I'm based in Ireland as well, so I encounter situations there. But you'll typically have a European skipper, and maybe on the larger vessels, some officers that will be European in origin, and they'll be on the share of the catch, profit share, whereas the non-European workforce will typically be on some form of fixed salary. So essentially it's a racialised form of pay. The prevalence of undocumented fishers and how they end up on vessels in other parts of the world, there's various different scenarios. They can be smuggled or trafficked, or you have what I refer to as the grey areas, people who arrive legally but for various reasons their documentation can lapse, so you have that kind of scenario as well. And the authorities can be deceived along the way. I mean, just to give again a very concrete recent example I've been dealing with in Ireland involving a number of Ghanaian fishers who ended up on an Irish vessel but were told that they were going to work on a UK vessel or given a UK contract, and the UK authorities were deceived when they landed in Heathrow Airport. Okay, you're working on a UK vessel, but then they crossed the border into Ireland working illegally for a year before their boat sank 2 months ago. So again, the profile of the migrant fisher, oftentimes they're rural. They tend to come from places outside the main urban centres. There could be issues around education and attainment. I've encountered issues of literacy even, and the language barriers are self-evident. And in terms of the trafficking and forced labour dimension, like this deception is the main method by which trafficking has taken place in my experience, where the fisher is promised as work of a certain standard, legal work, and often what transpires turns out to be much inferior. And all the other indicators that I list there: restricted movements, violence or threats of violence, and super exploitation in terms of the pay and the working conditions. So I want to try and quickly go through the area of governance. Governance when it comes to fisheries kind of falls into three areas: sustainability of fishing, safety, and labour governance. So there's some catchwords you hear are in the fishing industry when it comes to sustainability. And the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, which by the way, some of the figures I quoted earlier on are from the FAO in terms of the scale of the industry. But they have a particular watch or brief in terms of the question of sustainability. There we go. I have it printed in front of me here. So. Will I keep going or? Yeah. Okay. So they talk about maximum sustainable yields or total allowable catches. So you have basically marine institutes in many countries that will kind of aggregate their information in terms of what the state of the fish is out in the sea and what actually can be caught. And from that they derive quotas in terms of, and the quotas are then broken down by fleet or down to individual vessel level. The systems can vary worldwide. Because many fish species are migratory in character, particularly very lucrative species like tuna, you have intergovernmental organisations called RMFOs, Regional Fishery Management Organisations. They employ observers who are meant to kind of keep an eye on vessels in terms of what the catch levels are. Within the European Union, for example, you have a common fisheries policy, and that's how quotas are managed in the European context. You can have bilateral agreements between countries. One of the common ones that, again, I encounter is the EU Sustainable Fishery Partnership Agreement. So the EU Commission will negotiate with individual African states fishing rights on behalf of European vessels, and then the vessels will pay a licensing fee and they're meant to fish within certain limits, and it's all meant to be monitored and so on. And then UN and Food and Agricultural Organization Port State Management Agreement. That's a standard that they try and set in terms of how countries should enforce legal fishing within their respective exclusive economic zones. But despite all of this panoply of governance, you still have IUU fishing estimated to be around 20% of the global catch. And by the way, from the point of view of a migrant fisher, being coerced into illegal IUU fishing is an indicator of human trafficking, being coerced into doing illegal acts. So, no, the way around. Just quickly, in terms of whether fishing is sustainable, again from the FAO, they reckon that's about 30% of the fishing activity globally is unsustainable, and then you have about 60% is seen to be around maximum fishing at the absolute limit, and going beyond that will enter it into the red zone. And then it's a small minority, to 10% or less, that is perceived to be underfished. Okay, safety. So the UN's International Maritime Organization, IMO, is the main UN agency that has a brief over safety. And that's both safety in terms of structural safety of fishing vessels, but also safe systems of work. So the Cape Town Agreement is the main agreement governing the question of fishing vessel safety, structural safety, and so on, that it's seaworthy. And then in terms of the competence and training of fishers on board, STCWF, so that's the International Convention on Standards of Training, Certification and Watchkeeping for Fishing Vessel personnel. So typically it's about the officers and the people that have the running of the vessel and what their qualifications ought to be, and that there's mutual international recognition for some of those qualifications. And then there's a question of safe systems of work, and particularly hours of work and rest. Again, the Cardinal mentioned it already, that there's a massive culture in fishing globally of overwork. And there's a concern there from the point of view of fatigue and resultant accidents, or fatalities even, but also from the point of view of wages, from a trade union perspective, that the record of hours of work and rest is very important to see, is a fisher being paid correctly, to what degree are they being exploited. Their contract may say there's a standard working week of 39 or 48 hours, when in fact they're working multiples of that on many occasions. And it means in many scenarios that where there's a statutory minimum wage in various countries, the flag state that are paid below statutory minimum wage, and we discern that from the hours of work and rest. And again, despite all that governance, 100,000 plus estimated annual fatalities, and I think Eric Halliday's organisation, he's presenting this week, they came up with that figure and have some proposals to get more accurate figures in terms of the annual fatalities going forward. I won't go through all of these, but this is the labour perspective in terms of governance. There's a host of ILO, International Labour Organization conventions that have general applicability, not just in fishing, but are of definite relevance to fishing. But of particular relevance to fishing is ILO 188, the Work and Fishing Convention. And it's a very basic convention that provides for the minimum provisions on the age of the fisher, standardising medical examinations, the recruitment process, accommodation standards on the vessels, particularly vessels over 24 metres in length, personal protection, hours of work, rest, pay regimes, social security provision, injury and death in service. And just let's go forward. That's the 21 ratifications, pathetic, really, low priority. Now there are some in the pipeline. My own country, Ireland, is due to ratify quite soon. I know Cote d'Ivoire, likewise, but we've a long way to go in terms of ratifications. And there's already some countries like Bosnia, which I think has about 10 kilometres of coastline, has ratified, but we need the coastal countries to definitely step it up. But just to go back, problems of excessive hours, low pay, abuses, up to human trafficking. Again, they still persist despite all these systems of governance. And there's Jess there. So there was a survey done of by Dr. Jessica Sparks. 4,000 participants, she told me just before I got up here, so heavily participated in this survey for fishers globally. In terms of what their experience of the work was, 32% of experience loss of salary, 44% worsening working conditions, 48% withdrawal of onboard privileges. Typically, Wi-Fi access is the big issue for many fishers. 62% of verbal abuse, 44% being threatened with denunciation, as we call it, or being reported to the authorities, or being fearful of being sent home. and then 35% physical or sexual violence. So, you know, abnormally high levels of abuse and improper experiences. So what are the enforcement obstacles? Because you want to see that, in the sense, fisheries is a very governed, very regulated, globally, internationally, in many countries domestically as well. But you have all these problems of fatalities, exploitation, overfishing and so on. So we have the problem of piecemeal ratifications of the key conventions that we mentioned already. The question of flags of non-compliance and re-flagging for quota access. And just to give one example, one situation I had to deal with last year back home in Ireland were Indonesian fishers who were super exploited on a Spanish-owned vessel, but the vessel was flagged to Germany so that they could access German fishing quota in Irish waters. So you can imagine like the various authorities I had to deal with to try and deal with the situation that those particular fishers were facing. So again, we have the problem of national authorities operating in silos. So you have labour inspectors, maritime inspectors, fisheries management, police, immigration and so on. Each of them can get a part of the picture. The ITF has the advantage that we get the whole picture. We sit down and we get the full picture of the fishermen, the totality of their experience. But often then when we go on ourselves to deal with the authorities, we find each branch of the authorities may have part of the picture. And there could be issues there, they may miss other stuff. And therefore, in terms of getting remedies for fishers, that could pose real problems. Labour inspectors lacking in expertise or jurisdiction. So again, many labour inspectors, they're used to dealing with office, factory, shop, land-based employment, and the specificities of the work of fishing can elude them, and it makes it difficult for them to enforce. And there's jurisdictional issues too. So if you have a foreign flag vessel operating in your waters, the National Labour Inspector may not have jurisdiction to board that vessel and deal with issues that arise. The issue of fishing vessels being low priority for authorities relative to other forms of seafaring, that's just a fact. It's just a fact that if you have another resource, maritime inspectors, where do they prioritise? Will they prioritise the big cruise ship and the cargo vessels, or will they prioritise small fishing vessels? That's what we're up against. And that's a question of the fisher themselves. I would say myself and my other colleagues in the ITF, out of every 10 conversations we have with an exploited migrant fisher, the conclusion of the conversation is we do nothing. Certainly don't do anything right now. And the reason for that is that the fisher is likely to be mid-contract. They know they're being super exploited. They're capturing all sorts of abuses. But for them, it's rational to put up with that for now, so they can still send some money home. And typically, it's only at the point that the contract ends, or the contract ends even prematurely because they suffer a catastrophic injury, or something of that character, that they will give the ITF or affiliated unions the permission to then to go and try and act on their behalf. So there's a high level of enforced tolerance from that point of view. Very quickly, because I see Jason standing up there, we have a massive complicated ecosystem of NGOs, certifications and voluntary standards. So when you go to the supermarket, you often see that there's all sorts of claims being made on the seafood produce about how it was fished. Historically, these all focus on sustainability, very dolphin friendly, all this kind of thing. But increasingly there has been at least a superficial acknowledgement of the question of labour and the linked issue of labour exploitation. But you know, certainly from an ITF perspective, and so my colleague Chris Williams, again, I think joined with Dr. Jess Sparks, have written on this academic level papers just about the problematic nature of the claims of many of the certifications. We would counterpose that there are worker-driven social responsibility models which put the workers and fishers front and centre. Is a type of certification that we could have confidence in. There's a pilot taking place in Scotland at the moment. And then there's a whole other dialogue about human rights due diligence and the question of market-based penalties. So just again, the European Union is bringing in directives that will enable anybody, a union like ourselves or an NGO, to petition the customs officials in the European Union if we identify that seafood or any produce is tainted by forced labour or human trafficking, and use that as leverage to disrupt the exploitative trade. Very lastly, in terms of the ITF objectives, we've, as I said, only came into being as a section within the ITF in 2018. We've developed quite a comprehensive policy which will get ratified at our World Congress. Our Congress meets every 5 years. We're meeting in Marrakesh, so the policy deals with the issues of sustainability, governance, everything I just mentioned, but it kind of codifies it and gives our own union affiliates globally a standard to work through. We want to extend our own footprint in terms of organising affiliations and capacity building. You know, we're not present as much as we would like in all parts of the world, but we are extending. You know, certainly we have extended over the last 6 years. Part of our brief is trying to lobby and campaign for increased ratifications that I mentioned earlier on. And then trying to get international collective bargaining agreements in place to match what our colleagues in general seafaring have done, where you have collective bargaining agreements that are, you know, that unions can stand over. We are identifying the French and Spanish tuna vessels as where we think we could potentially make our first breakthrough, but then we do want to look at the Asian fleets, Japanese, Korean, and Taiwanese as well, and establish those levels of agreements. And then also scale up the global complaint handling capacity. So we just get random emails coming in from all over the world from fishers that are encountering all sorts of situations. And we know there are other organisations out there, Stella Maris, ISSF who are here and so on, and we're actually having a discussion among ourselves about how we can achieve synergies and tap into some funding out there as well in terms of having a collective greater capacity to deal with complaints from fishers no matter what part of the world they come from. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. If it's possible, if that's okay, could I ask that we save the questions for you, because Rossen, your colleague, will be speaking in just a few moments, and we can maybe ask both of you to come back up and answer some questions from the ITA perspective.
Well, I obviously spoke over my time.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful overview of some of the issues, and I think it's so nice on the first day of the panel to get the frame of reference to what we're dealing with. Certainly lots of information, but I think it hooks into so many of us in the room to hear these different realities. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Our next presenter is Professor Wen-Hong Liu from the Center for Marine Affairs Studies at the National Kaohsiung University of Science and Technology here in Taiwan, and he will be speaking on protecting migrant labor rights within distant water fishery sector, a comparative analysis of legal frameworks in Northeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, host the institution. Noon, actually, it's almost in the lunch. So, I would like to thank you, Stella Maris and Father who's giving the opportunity to help me to introduce my research about protecting migrant labor rights within distant water fisheries. Center a comparative analysis of the legal framework in Northeast Asia. We will discuss about Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. I would like this project is also supported by fishery agency. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Zhang, to give us the support. So we have the content about introduction, method, and material findings, and policy recommendation. Should we know the plight of the migrants? As student migrants, ratios are often critical labor force in this water fishery industry. However, many employers that is protective hiring practice to reduce the labor costs, frequently leading to the forced labor. So common practice we can find including non-payment and withhold the wages and restriction of the movement, confiscation of withholding the personal documents, especially their passport, airbags and bondage, insensitive working hours with insufficient rest. We'll discuss it later because it actually will be the most important issue due to the fishery operational issue. Verbal and physical abuse and inadequate food and even the violence. So major distant water fishing nations in North Asia, such as Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, also face the situation. We know these three countries occupy many big part of the catch in the world. They have the tuna long line and the spring pole line and the push since. So the issue of the migrant fishery in Taiwan, Japan, and Koreans. So I think we come to Taiwan, Taiwanese fishery catch a lot of attention, especially in these issues. With this report, Taiwanese eastern water fishery have many serious problems in the models level. And in 2020 and 2022, U.S. put Taiwanese eastern water fisheries on the list of the good products by child labor or forced labors. So Taiwan is EWF have been made under the international scrutiny. And in Korea, migrant fishery engage in or are often subject to the severe physical and verbal abuse alongside as if the long work hours. In Japan, migrant workers have faced the spiritual discriminatory practice which manifests in the direct balance and unpaid overtime because the captain have to work on board all the time, maybe half a year or 1 year, they cannot leave. So how can they to manage the fishery without many important issues? So the rights of the migrant fishery and the SDGs enhance the human rights of migrant fisheries is also essential for the attainment of the SDGs, especially for the SDGs 8.7 is essential for our to eliminate the forced labor and the modern slave for this 8.5 scope. So this issue also related to the SDG 10 and the SDG 1, SDG 5, 16 and 17. So as we know, the C1AA is a comprehensive international agreement and applies to the value from the commercial fishing. It's primarily adjusted to establish a minimum standard and safeguarding the rights and the interests in fishery. Although now it's only 21 countries ratified this convention, but we see that's an appropriate foundation for analyzing the legal framework of different countries regarding the rights of the migrant fisheries. So we use the select provision of the C1AA as a full criterion to examine the national legal framework and comparing the similarity and the difference between the three countries to try to contribute to the protection of migrant fisheries rights and achievement of SDGs. So we have the methods and the criteria. The Rossen and the Cardinal 2022, the research the procedure was used to this research. The first one is to formulate the interpretation by reading for the data for each country to gain an overview of the content and develop initiatives. The second is to conduct a flattened interpretation and we exporting how and why. The following is providing a case overview for each country, elaborating the general policy for DWF the migrant fisheries. The final one is implementing comparative analysis to all the emergencies between the countries. The four criteria includes the minimum requirement work on the board and working condition, accommodation and meals, and medical care, social security, and occupation safety. So we got the material from different official law and policy document to understand the action of the three countries. So we can find the key finding. In terms of the minimum requirement for the worker on the boat, the regulation in Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea are in line with the C1AA concerned with the minimum ages for persons because we ask the person officials who can go on board work, he must be assessed 16 years old. physical examination, Taiwanese physical examination standards are little bit less falling behind Japan and South Korea, because Japan and South Korea, as they have to issue a healthy certificate, must be issued by the doctors. About the wages, I think our fishery agency owe a lot. So as the Taiwan's wage level is rise to the $505, which is lower than Japan, but slightly higher than South Korea. So all three countries are active in relative conflict. With regarding to the period of the rest, Taiwan and South Korea are both in line with the spirit of the C1AA Convention. That means we have to let the officials rest not less than 10 hours within 1 day. But Japan is only asked for 8 hours. This will cause another issue. We will discuss later. Repatriation mechanism and condition. Taiwan is known as a less in line with the 1AA and left behind Japan and South Korea. Because we just only ask the employer to pay a transportation fee, but about the meal and accommodation pay, we have to negotiate with the official, migrant official. Regarding to the accommodation space, the three countries align with the C1AA. Food and potable water, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea all meet the standard, but emphasize on the various from the country to country. Medical care, although Taiwan provides medical protection from insurance, is still insufficient compared to Japan and South Korea. And social security, Taiwan is a bit lag behind in this way, where Japan and South Korea have the relative comprehensive mechanism on the social security. Because Taiwan is only certificate the insurance of the fishery in the working time, but Japan and Korea have their insurance have to cover all the life of the officials. Occupational safety and health certain protection. Taiwan and Japan are both insufficient and in their addressing the issue, but South Korea is better. So after both the analysis, we can find the results. Okay. Find results, but we can so just skip it. We can come to the conclusion. So, return the working time, the rest time issues, and Taiwan and Japan only ask the time rest for 10 hours. And if we just start rest from the beginning of the first day for 10 hours, and then we take a rest by the end of the second day for another 10 hours. So that will cause the continued work for 20 hours problem. So if that would be happen, for example, when we go to catch a squid, lots of squid pop in. Lots of squid, we have to take care of, we have to handle the catch. But we have to handle the catch maybe 2 and 3 days because lots of squids becoming, we have to handle all the catches. So the officials have to work maybe for 28 hours. But in Korea, they ask the interval of the rest time cannot exceed 14 hours. So that's the difference between Korea and Taiwan and the Japanese. So I think Korea in this issue is performs maybe better. According to the occupation safety, hygiene, and accident prevention. So I think in Japan, the Seafarer Act Article 81 and 82, they mention the hygiene on board, but never mention about the occupation safety and accident prevention. In Korea, they, according to their Seafarer Act, Article 161, and they specify the seafarer have to take the training, and Article 78 and 79 and 80 specify the safety and healthy policy on board, and stipulate the safety, health, and accident standard. So the safety and health of the seafarer have to ask the fishermen to take the relative education and training. So I think in terms of these issues, I think Korea performed better. And finally, I think about meal and water. In Taiwan, we respect the religions limitations, so I think the captain will to ask our cooker to cook different kind of food for the visuals and make sure they are hygiene and have enough and then make the prices fair. Compared to the Japan and Korea, Korea stimulated the minimum meal expense to make sure the fishermen their supply and standards. And the Japanese also provide the nutrition standards for meal to make sure the fishermen can become healthy and achieve their work safety and efficiency. Okay, we come to the policy suggestion. To safeguard the rights of migrant fishermen, it's imperative to revise and adjust national policy and regulation to align with the C1AA. Although it's a soft word, but I think large people pay a lot of attention this issue. And as many people, we want the human rights should be protected. So this can establish the minimum standard for working conditions in the DWF sector. The second one is the enhancement in pre-employment. Training are crucial providing comprehensive education in fish technology, the vessel operation, and the safety protocol. The third one is the improvement of health care and safety on board is also essential, which includes equipping a vessel with medical kits, often multilingual instruction for non-native speakers, and ensuring all the foster aid personnel receive rigorous training. To kill is protective practice by labor broker, strict regulation and international cooperation are required. Partner with the relevant organization to foster protection. Moreover, initiate part of awareness campaign to challenge, prevent social norm and address the bias against foreign labor can cultivate a more inclusive and supportive working environment. As the former speaker talked about, we have to encourage the official company to uphold their CSR to commitment to the significant advance in working conditions and the fair treatment of the migrant fishermen. That's all my presentation. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this presentation. There was a lot to learn and to discuss in this presentation. We have a few moments now for questions. Who has a question? We have a question in the back corner, and then the second question will come back from there. I think we'll just have time for 2 questions now. So first question there, second question, and then we'll move on to the final speaker. If you could say your name, where you're from, and a brief question, please.
Sure. Thanks, Professor Liu, for your good research. I'm Wen-Hong from Serve the People Association. So we can see that from your research, it already shows Taiwan is even behind Japan and Korea in many ways. And I think this is a common way from our government to compare the bad guys together and say, oh, we're not the worst. Sometimes this kind of comparison blurs the problem of how the migrant fishermen on the Taiwan vessels are exploited, are deprived of their basic rights. And secondly, you also mentioned about C-188. So we strongly request our government to ratify C-188, but until now, they're still resisting. And thirdly, I would like to review some facts. Have you asked how many fishermen on our vessels can really sleep for continuous 10 hours? How many of them? How many of them, they have to work continually for more than 16 hours a day? And have you asked the brokers and employers and the fishermen how the salary was paid? As a reviewer from the agency for foreign for Eastern water fishing, I can testify openly, publicly. Almost every vessel and every migrant fisherman, the salary was paid by the brokers first. The employer will refund to the broker several months or even a year after. How ridiculous it is! But maybe that's the scope of your research. You didn't cover all that. But these problems are so severe. And one thing more, the fishermen, they have to stay at sea for months or even a year without any means of communication to their families or any group or the unions, which ITF strongly demanded that they don't have any communication. How can they have any confirmation to even a salary whether they is received? So these are the real problems, Doctor. Your research doesn't cover this. We should reflect all of these problems to our government. These are the issues they have to be addressed and met immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your suggestion. I think that's very important because we had several meetings and our migrant officials also proposed this issue. I think the office of the Fisheries Agency will already notice these issues. But it's, we try to find a way to help our, especially for the Fisheries Association. They want establish a new mechanism between the broker and the fisherman. So we try to find a way to do that. I think, especially for the resident, work very hard for this kind of the issues.
And we have one second question, please.
I think occupational.
If you could please just say your name and where you're from, please.
Okay, sure. Jennifer from Reno Novaro Social Service Center in Taipei, Taiwan. I think the safe and the safe working environment is quite important for migrant fishing workers. So I'm concerned and I would like to know more about the security and the medical care about the fisher workers. Firstly, you mentioned about you check some document and regulation about the different countries, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, and talking about their working environment. I just wonder, besides you check the documents and regulation, it's better to ask the authority to come to visit these decent fishing vessels annually to make sure the micro fisher workers to live and to work in a safety environment. This is the first one. And second, you mentioned about in Japan or in South Korea, they ask and request every decent fishing vessels to assign a doctor, medical doctor, or first aid person in vessels. And about Taiwan, even we have a health insurance, but we're far behind this standard. So I just wonder if the employers or some micro fisher workers, because they go for their fishing district, it's better to have 4 hours or 8 hours first aid training, and it's better to help their fishing industry and to live in a safe environment.
Thank you for your suggestion. I think this is very key suggestion provided by us. Because in Japan and Korea, they stipulate they have to send a doctor or first aid personnel on board. So that's different with Taiwan. But I think in Taiwan, especially fishery entrepreneurship, they start to think about this. They have to have a new plan to train the first aid personnel to make sure the occupation and working safety on board. I think fishery agency maybe can put this kind of suggestion on note to make sure every company can follow this kind of action.
Let's join in thanking Professor Liu for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to move the program on. I'm very sorry that I need to cut questions off. It means that at lunch we're going to have even better conversations over lunch. We do have one more presentation before we break for lunch, and that's by Mr. Rossen, Karauatcheu, who is the Fisheries Coordinator in the ITF Maritime Department. He has been so since August 2020, but has already worked since 2004 for the ITF. Originally from Bulgaria and graduated from the Bulgarian Naval Academy, holds captain certificate for ships of up to 3,000 gross guns. It's good to have a captain for us to guide us into lunch after this. So, Rossen, thank you for your presentation and being with us. The floor is yours.
Hello to everyone. I'm Rossen Karauatcheu from the ITF Fisheries section. I was given the pleasure to speak about the most easiest topic, or the worst topic, of the social protection provision for fishers where we were. 105 years after the law was established, we're almost nowhere. There are a lot of work to be done. More than 100 years ago, the ILO decided that the maritime workers should be treated equal to the land-based, and there should be a special instrument developed for them. ILO started working on the dedicated instrument for fishers in 1958. After a campaign by the ITF for 13 years, the section was established in 1945. Michael is right that the team in London started 5 or 6 years ago, but the fisheries section of ITF exists for nearly 8 years. And in order to address the social security and health, we have to start from what ILO think about the decent work agenda. And the 4 pillars of the decent work agenda. This is to work for job creation, sustainable employment, to secure a social dialogue and tripartite in the industrial relation, to provide for a social protection for all workers, and to respect and implement fundamental principles and rights of work, which are the freedom of association and the right of collective bargaining, elimination of forced labor, abolition of child labor, elimination of discrimination in employment, including elimination of discrimination of migrant workers, and the last one, and not the least, which was recently added, the safe and healthy environment of all the workers, including Maritime. And in order to general, speaking about the safe and healthy working environment, its fundamental principle as of 2022, this means that occupational safety and health can no longer be considered an optional extra. The principle concerning the fundamental right to a safe and healthy environment contains provisions for covering all branches of activities and all workers, and they're the basis for the safety and health measures provided in other instruments of dialogue. And because of the specific of the work at sea, special consideration is needed for the safety and health of those who work on the fishing vessels, including ensuring that they are medically fit for that work before they join the vessel and while they work on board. Fishing is one, if not the most hazardous occupation in the world, and has been designated as hazardous industry by the ILO for a long time. 100 fishers' lives are lost every year, causing great sorrow and offer living families in financial hardship. If you need to ask questions about the 100,000 that at sea, do not hesitate to ask my colleague Eric Holiday tomorrow during his presentation. There is a clear evidence that the nature of fishing operation is a significant cause of many of the injuries and accidents affecting fishers. Speaking about numbers, if there is 35 or 36 million and 100,000 of them are die every year, that means that at least 10 times more, or at least 1 million fishers working at sea are affected by serious accidents and injuries every year. And then what in general has to be done from the point of view of International Labour Organization, which include all the social partners, governments, employers, and workers' representatives. First is the need of medical care. So there must be appropriate medical equipment and supplies on board. On each fishing vessel, there should be at least one fisher training first aid. And if you're speaking about bigger fishing vessels over 24 meters, spending a long period at sea on the high seas, there should be someone who is trained in providing medical care, which is additional requirement after the requirement of the International Maritime Organization. All the vessels fishing on the high seas for longer period has to be equipped with radio or satellite communication. And if they are required to be equipped with radio or satellite communication, there is no reason the fishers themselves to be able to be denied access to communication to the people on shore. Once there is a radio or satellite communication, the right of fishers to medical care on board should be respected and implemented and enforced. If there is a need for additional advice, there should be medical centers available on shore to provide advice. In the best scenario of telemedicine. Then everyone who is working as fisher, whether on the coastal fishing or on the high seas, has the right to medical treatment ashore if seriously sick or injured, and it has to be done either through the national legislation and covered with the government authorities, the right to medical treatment, or should be done with the responsibility of the ship owner. And then speaking about social security, I mentioned that equal treatment of maritime workers is a concept which is more than 100 years old. So the fishers should, must, and maybe they should and must be entitled to social security benefits, which then should be developed, and they should be no less favorable than those for any other land-based work. And then on top of that, beside the social security, in addition, if there is a need for protection in the case of work-related sickness, injury, or death, and the fishers should, they may, should, and must have access to appropriate medical care and compensation if they get injured or sick. This is included in the relevant articles of the Working Fishing Convention, which deal with social security, and because it's a difficult topic and difficult to implement, it allows for comprehensive protection, which means that when the authorities start developing regulation and practical measures for provide social security can be done on a longer period of 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And there should be proper step to achieve protection. And the principle, which is that the social security should be provided in the country where the fisheries reside. Because if you're a migrant worker traveling to many other countries all over the world, it's mission impossible to provide social security provisions in each other country, especially much more difficult if you work on fishing vessels. Is generally excluded from the fishers or seafarers are excluded from our full right to social security in the next stage. Then, if you're speculating about protection in the case of work-related sickness, injury, and death, there should be measures provided by the fishers in accordance with national law, regulation, practices for work-related sickness, injury, or death. And in the case of injury due to the occupational accident disease, the fishers shall have access to appropriate medical care, compensation in accordance with the national law and regulation, and the protection. The way it can be done either by the system of fishing vessel owner liability, or by compulsory insurance, or worker compensation, or nationals gaining access to the general social security. Then coming back to the very same articles, how this can be done. It's if someone works abroad, let's say from Indonesian fishers comes to work on our Taiwanese vessel, there should be a bilateral agreement between Taiwan and Indonesia for the social security and any other arrangements between how to be done. And the member states or each country, they are obliged to cooperate. They're not encouraged. They're obliged to achieve progressive protection on the basis of equality of treatment, respective of nationality, and to ensure right that where or in process are maintained regardless of the reason. So, again, from the practical point of view, in the case of emergency, the fisher should be, the ship must go into the port or to arrange for assistance to be given to the fishers, and then if he's still sick, then to be repatriated back home. In the case of Indonesia, and then to be provide additional medical care as needed and as organized, and then to be given sick leave in accordance with the national legislation, or 3, 4, 5, 6, or and then it's up to the member state to decide other rules to the regional economic integration organization, which the previous speaker spoke about was happening in South Korea, Japan, in Taiwan. There might be a regional agreement how this can be achieved, or it can be an arrangement for around the regional fisheries management organization or any other structure. And I'm saying again, the principle no less favorable treatment. The fisher is a human being, he's a worker, he's entitled to the same as any land-based worker. And then coming back to the Working Fishing Convention, actually this is written what needs to be done. It has to be included in the employment contract of the fisher. And what needs to be included is in the annex of the convention, which is compulsory, not the recommendation. It has to be done. In the work agreement, irrespective of whether a share of the catch or employment agreement shall contain the following, include, except insofar as the inclusion of one or more of them is rendered unnecessary by the fact that the matter is regulated by the national law or regulations, so there is a national legislation already in place, or collective bargaining agreement if such agreement exists, which has to include the social security provision to be supplied to the fisher unless some other system is provided by the national law or regulation, the protection that will cover the fisher in the event of sickness, injury, or death, and the health and social security coverage and benefits to be provided by the fisher, by the employed fisher vessel owner, or any other party or parties to the fisher work agreement possibly. This is the very short, simple explanation how easy it is to provide social security to fishers and health.